Jacob seems to have a perfect life, yet he is filled with pain because he can hear a mysterious stranger's voice trying to communicate with him. And the voice is becoming clearer and giving him warnings at critical moments. How will Jacob deal with this unwelcome roommate? Let's dive into this novel. Chapter 1. William. Jacob. Time to get up. You've got half an hour before you need to leave. Grace called out, her voice echoing through the house as she performed her daily wake-up ritual for her two sons. 19-year-old William, ever the difficult riser, groaned and buried his face deeper into his pillow. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Jacob, who had been awake for an hour already, feigned sleep for his mother's benefit. His eyes, heavy with fatigue, remained closed as he listened to the familiar sounds of the morning routine. Scott appeared in the doorway beside his wife, his cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the sleepy atmosphere of the boys' room. "Well, come on. Up you get," he urged, his tone a mixture of encouragement and resignation. Jacob's sleep-deprived eyes finally fluttered open, taking in the sight of his parents standing in the doorway. Despite his exhaustion, he couldn't help but notice how ready and energetic they looked to start their day. "I don't want to get up," William mumbled, his voice muffled by the pillow he'd pulled over his head. Scott's gaze shifted between his two sons, his smile unwavering. "Come on. Will, you're running out of time to get ready." He then turned his attention to Jacob, noting the dark circles under his eyes but choosing not to comment. "I want to see both of you downstairs and ready in 20 minutes. With that, he planted a quick kiss on Grace's cheek and headed out. Grace lingered in the doorway, her observant eyes taking in the scene before her. She watched as Jacob, clearly exhausted but respectful of the family's morning routine, slowly sat up and swung his legs over the side of the bed. William, still reluctant, finally emerged from beneath his pillow. As they both stood, Grace cowled and helped but marvel at how they matched their father's tall frame. Despite the 2-year age gap between them, the brothers shared the small room, arrangement that suited them well. Their parents had instilled in them a deep respect for family and each other's space. Even in close quarters, they managed to maintain a balance between togetherness and privacy. True to his nature, William monopolized the bathroom, meticulously grooming himself for college. His popularity, while less crucial now than in secondary school, still mattered to him. He took great care with his appearance, aware that first impressions could still make a difference, even if the occasional immature classmate tried to assert dominance through other means. As William primped and preened, Jacob found himself rushing through his morning routine. He disliked these hurried mornings, longing for the luxury of a slower start to properly shake off the lingering tendrils of sleep. Yet, he knew the importance of being on time and pushed through his drowsiness, determined to meet his father's 20-minute deadline. The boys eventually entered the kitchen to have breakfast. Grace and Scott stopped their conversation, starting a new subject rather abruptly. "Your breakfast is on the table. Eat as much as you can because winnets." Scott always drove them to college. Grace usually left at the same time, but her work was in the opposite direction, so she used her car. "What have you both got today?" she asked, tossing her brown hair over her shoulder. "I've got to hours of sociology and then to hours of sports management." William sighed tiredly. He shoved a full crumpet into his mouth, earning a chuckle from his dad. Jacob ran a hand through his messy brown hair and rubbed his eyes. He was definitely not a morning person and would often prove it if he could sleep at night. "What have you got?" she asked when Jacob didn't say anything. He hummed quietly. "I don't know." Unlike William, Jacob was very disorganized. He could barely remember whether he had homework or what subjects were on what days. He often had too many things going on in his mind. "You can check in the car." Scott smiled. "But eat some more food before we go." His younger son started to fidget and avoid eye contact. Scott made a mental note to call him later. "Right? I'm going to work. I'll see you all at dinner time." Grace leaned over to kiss Jacob on the cheek. He smiled in her direction but avoided her gaze. She kissed William and her husband too. "Have a great day, everyone." "You too. Love." Scott watched her leave. They met when Grace was 20, and he was 23. A year later, she fell pregnant with William, so he proposed to her. They were madly in love and managed to raise their first baby without a single fault in their relationship. When they had Jacob, they both had a steady income and could start to build their lives. Now, 17 years later, they are still faithful to their happy family label and love each other just as much as when they first met. "Come on, boys. We should get going too." Just before they left, Scott turned to see what Jacob was carrying. "Where's your bag-o?" He quickly turned towards the stairs. "We'll wait for you in the car." Jacob staggered into the bedroom and spotted his bag on his bed. Hurrying over to it, he made sure it had everything he needed and hung it over his shoulder, rubbing his stinging eyes to keep himself together. After taking a step back through the door, he paused when what had been troubling him for half a year entered his mind. He clenched his jaw and tugged on his coat sleeves, attempting to block it out, wishing he could have just one regular day. For Jacob, he believed that he was far from average. Yes, he had loving parents, a loving sibling, a warm home, and a good education. Underneath the perfect shell that people see and judge him for, nobody knew about the voices. Chapter to the voices started only 6 months ago. He was sitting at the dining room table enjoying dinner with his family when a deep and unfamiliar voice intruded on his thoughts. He held in high the sudden shock which poked his family's attention. Of course, the voice didn't stop. It was not making sense, and because he was so confused and scared, it only grew louder. With Scott being a psychologist, he knew there was something immediately wrong with his son, even when Jacob tried to cover it up. He has always been a shy and quiet character, and he has always struggled with expressing himself. Scott knew his children like the back of his own hand, and he knew Jacob was struggling. Scott was able to take his son to work with him and have a work colleague treat him as one of his patients for a while. He would never call him that, which is why he passed him on to a trustworthy friend. It was best if he did not work directly with his son. Jacob needed his parents more than ever. His dad needed to be a father, not his psychologist. Eventually, Jacob told his family about the voice, and they had been very supportive. But it was hard for Grace. She felt that maybe she had been too harsh with her timid child. Jacob's symptoms were unusual because he didn't have any. He was completely normal. He felt unusually himself, and nothing for him had changed other than hearing a voice. Grace even wondered if he was doing it for attention. But he was not the kind of teenager to crave attention, and he seemed truthfully scared of what was happening to him. Grace wanted him tested on a number of medications, but not a single thing worked. Jacob saw several specialists, and still, nothing could help him. Now, half a year later, the voice was still in their son's head, and Grace hadn't found anything that could help. Jacob hurried towards the car, not wanting to be late. William had taken the front seat, only so his dad could talk to him privately. He had told him to look out for his brother today. When everything happened with Jacob, William felt like it was his job as being his older brother to look after him. The most important part was that he should never treat Jacob any different. "Have you got everything?" Scott asked when his son shut the door. "Yeah, all right. Let's go, let's go." He beamed and allowed William to choose some music. When they arrived outside the college, William saw his friends and jumped out of the car, but Scott stopped Jacob. "Hold on a second." They both waited until William had gone before turning around. "I just wanted to ask, did you have trouble sleeping last night?" Hesitating, Jacob nodded to say yes. He hated how his parents worried about him like this, but in reality, he was worried about himself too. Scott understood that his son has had trouble making friends since he has started college. He distanced himself from everyone and stayed private and reserved. "I've been thinking about prescribing you with some sleeping tablets. Now that would mean talking to Flynn, the psychiatrist, but I want to discuss it with you later about your own thoughts on it." Jacob sighed and looked down at his hands. "I don't want them," he whispered. "I know, which I know. But it's not fair that you're struggling to. I'm fine." He climbed out of the car, silencing their conversation. Scott watched his son pull up his hood and walk away. He was definitely going to call him later. The last thing he wanted was to get a call from college, telling him that his son has had a breakdown. Again, it did get overwhelming for Jacob. When he tried to concentrate, all he could hear was a deep male voice dominating his thoughts. As he approached the main entrance, he pulled his hood down and walked inside. He had a feeling of dread in the pit of his stomach. He wanted to go home already, and his lessons hadn't even started. People were hanging around in groups, chatting and catching up on what everyone had been up to at the weekend. Jacob kept his head down and stared at the ground until the voice he was getting used to spoke above his own thoughts. Rough morning. He clenched his jaw and tried not to think about answering it. The voice spoke like it was someone who could see him, and it messed with his mind more than anything. It would make him anxious, and he would catch himself glancing around as he slowly lost the trust in everyone he saw. Quite obviously, it was nobody. This voice in his head was a creation imagination. Just because nobody knew what was wrong with him didn't mean that he wasn't well. Jacob knew that he was right in the mind to have a voice in there that was his own. "You look tired." Jacob rubbed his eyes for what felt like the 100th time that morning and stood outside the classroom, waiting for the teacher. At least 15 other students stood in the corridor too, but nobody noticed him. "You need a coffee. We should get one together sometime. You don't exist." Jacob thought back and linked his fingers together so he didn't fidget. "Don't I?" He sighed and tried to ignore it by adjusting his gaze to somewhere new. He looked up but caught the gaze of someone else. It was a tall guy standing only a few meters away from the room. He was with 5 other males, all as big as him. But this guy was looking directly at Jacob, making him feel really uncomfortable. He diverted his eyes at lightning speed. Cute. He mentally cringed, hating how it felt like the voice was judging him. What worried him the most was how unpredictable it had been in the beginning. Everyone thought it would start to say bad things or persuade Jacob to do bad things to himself or others. That the voice talked to him like a friend. It was supportive and had humor. Sometimes, Jacob still disliked it being in his head because of how crazy it made him feel. It was normal, and he definitely knew that. "I'm sorry. I know I'm a disturbance, but there's nothing I can do." Jacob leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. He kept his gaze down, just in case the guy was still watching him. "Maybe he knows he's a freak." "You're not a freak." "Of course I am. I'm having a conversation with a different voice in my head." He snapped back. "It's not your fault." How he was getting a little irritated. "You're in my head. Take a breath. Don't work yourself up." Jacob's palms were getting sweaty. He was supposed to respond to the voice and hold a conversation, but sometimes he couldn't help it. He uncrossed his arms and began to fidget, breathing in a lot of air. He tried to relax. A group of around 10 people wandered down the corridor, chatting happily and looking rather lively for a Monday morning. Among that group of people was William, Jacob's older brother, but he spotted his friend before he spotted him. Jacob looked up when he heard the door to the classroom open. For a moment, he considered turning the opposite way and walking to somewhere quiet so he could keep himself together. Before he had the chance, his brother caught him hiding in the shadows. "Jacob." "Hey," he smiled and walked over. "Are you in this class?" "I am too." "We can sit." He noticed that things were not quite right. "Are you okay?" Jacob was able to meet his eyes, but only for a second. That was enough confirmation for William to know he was struggling. "Do you want to call Dad? I can take notes for you. Or we can ditch college and go for a walk." Jacob shook his head and sighed once more. It'll be fine. I just need to calm down." "Okay." William patted his shoulder. "Come on. Let's sit at the back. Don't bother taking notes. You can look at mine later." Jacob nodded and followed him. He felt grateful to have such a supportive sibling as they made their way to the back row. William greeted someone and sat down on the last 2 chairs. Jacob sat on the end and sank into a seat, concentrating on how much sleep he was going to have when he got home. "Oh, by the way, I talked to the tutor about partnering up for the project, and he said you can work with us," William murmured as the teacher prepared his PowerPoint at the front of the room. Jacob was about to nod until he narrowed his eyes. Us, he questioned quietly. Yeah, my friend will work with us too. Don't worry. He's easy to get on with. He watched William turn and tapped the guy next to him, making him turn. But when he did, Jacob recognized him as the guy who was watching him earlier. This is my brother, Jacob, William introduced. Hey, the man spoke with a deep voice and an intrigued stare. I'm Hunter. It's nice to meet you. Jacob's lips curled into the smallest smile he had ever performed before dropping his gaze back to the desk and sinking his body further into his chair. He could feel Hunter studying him until the teacher began to talk. As he did so, Jacob fiddled with his coat sleeves and lost himself in his thoughts. Niggling in the back of his mind, there was something about Hunter's voice. Something oddly familiar. Chapter 3. When the lesson finished, Jacob was dozing until William tapped his shoulder. I wish I could have slept through that too. He sighed. His younger brother stood up with a confused frown. What was it about? He mumbled. Did you not listen to any of it? Jacob shrugged and moved so they could start making their way out of the busy room. It doesn't matter. You can look at my notes when we're home. When they reached the hallway, it was time for the brothers to go to separate lessons. Did we finish at the same time today, Jacob pulled his bag from his back and rummaged through it. Just as he reached for his timetable, a guy bumped into him, and he dropped it. Everything spilled onto the floor. Hey, watch where you're going. William frowned, but the guy turned with a scowl directed straight for Jacob. Freak, he muttered, loud enough for the brothers to hear. What did you say? William stormed after him. Jacob tried to ignore it as he leaned down to pick up his things. William grabbed the boy's shoulder, but he turned and pushed him away, just as Hunter approached them. Hunter rammed the guy into the opposite wall, who froze when he saw who had pushed him. What do you think you're doing? Hunter growled. Get off me, the guy muttered, a little timid of Hunter's big frame. He washed shy about holding back a glare until he eventually left, giving Hunter a reason to back off. Thanks, man. William sighed, turning to see if his brother was okay. Jacob was at the end of the corridor when he saw him walk quickly out of sight. Jacob hated confrontation. He knew his brother would be okay because he could stick up for himself. Even though they were the same height and pretty much the same weight, Jacob didn't have the confidence to talk back to people when they deserved it. Are you okay? The deep voice was so loud in his mind. He almost jumped. Get out of my head, he thought, and clenched his jaw. Where are you going? He had decided that today just was going to be a good one. It began rough, and he needed some long hours by himself without having to pretend that he was okay. Your brother is worried about you. Will you just be quiet? He said out loud, catching the attention of a tutor who stood next to the reception. Jacob chewed on his bottom lip and dug his hands into his pockets. His face burned with embarrassment. Sometimes he wished the ground would swallow him whole as he quickly made a smooth exit out of the double doors and into the sun. As he put his hood up, he saw a group of boys standing and chatting. A few of them stopped and watched him walk down the steps. He recognized them. They were standing with Hunter when he first caught him staring. Jacob gripped his bag straps and marched across the car park. He wanted to be very far from civilization today. Things will get better, I promise. Jacob wanted to laugh out loud at how stupid that statement was. Leave me alone. I can't. Even if I wanted to. Jacob continued into the trees. If he walked for 15 minutes or so, he would reach a field where he could lie down and shut the world out for a little while. All Jacob wanted was some peace. He used to like his own company, but now it felt like a curse. There was someone else in his head. How could he escape that? After 5 minutes of walking, his phone started to vibrate in his pocket. Jacob waited until it stopped before checking who it was. Of course, it was his dad. He ignored it. He didn't want to talk about his feelings. Not over the phone. The sun started to set at 6:30 in the evening. The sky was clear, creating a beautiful pink and 𝐸𝐴 before the sun fully disappeared to wake the other side of the world. Jacob was lying in the field, and for hours ago he fell asleep. Now that it was getting dark, It was safe for him to be in the middle of nowhere. Jacob turned over. His head was resting on his bag, and his coat was zipped all the way up. It felt a little chilly without the sun rays. "It's not safe for you here." Jacob stirred when he heard someone talking. It was slowly pulling him to his senses. "It's not safe." He woke up with fright when the deep voice dominated his mind. He quickly sat up with a shaky breath. His eyes darted around the open field, surprised that it was evening time. "You need to go home." He relaxed. He was still alone, and nobody was here trying to put him in danger. The fact that he was alone and hearing the voice pull together a dark cloud that hung above his head. He sighed, rubbed his eyes, and slowly climbed to his feet. He checked his watch and then his phone. He had 5 missed calls from his dad, and 3 from William. He groaned, and the guilt hit his chest. They worry about him too much. "Go home, Jacob. It's getting dark. I don't care. I want to be outside." "I know, but it's not safe." "You don't know that." He picked up his bag. "You're not even real." "I am real. You just don't know who I am." The hairs on the back of Jacob's neck stood on end. He hated it when it spoke like it was an actual person, listening to his inner thoughts. He now felt on edge about being alone in a place like this. His eyes scanned his surroundings, and it felt like he was being watched. Though it's not safe. He heard faint snapping of branches and decided that the voice in his head had more common sense than him. Jacob started to jog back towards the trees. He was going to stop until he reached the car park. That's it. Go all the way home. Sometimes, the voice was very good at making him do the right thing, especially when he was in the right frame of mind. Eventually, Jacob reached the car park and stopped to catch his breath. Tutors and other members of staff were leaving the building while he quietly walked by and kept his head down. It would take him another 40 minutes to get home, but he was aware that his mother was driving around looking for him. After his nap, he felt better, even though he was hungry, cold, and sore from sleeping on the grass. Having a refreshed body was all he longed for most days. Over the past couple of months, the voice had started to talk to him more, especially when he was feeling sad, which was also more often. He knew that maybe feeling depressed would fuel the voice further, so he did try to stay positive. He was losing faith that he would ever be normal again. "Jacob." A woman's voice dragged him out of his thoughts. He turned at lightning speed. "Jacob Jones, get in this car right now." "In the dimly lit street?" A familiar car pulled up next to him with an angry-looking woman glaring from the driver's seat. Jacob's eyes had grown amused. It was his mother. Slowly, he reached for the door and hesitantly climbed in. He was going to get a big lecture about safety, and he didn't want to hear any of it. "Where on earth have you been? Why didn't you answer your phone? Your father and I had been so worried about you." She yelled before she even thought about taking him home. "I fell asleep. I'm sorry." He spoke quietly and pulled his sleeves over his hands. "You fell asleep. Where?" she questioned. "It wasn't in that field again, was it? You know we don't like you going there. You're too vulnerable. Are you trying to worry us on purpose?" He whispered and looked down at his feet. "I didn't have a good morning." Grace's shuffled closer and put her arm around his broad shoulders. "I love you when you're not ignoring us like this." She patted his knee. "You know that, right?" Jacob nodded with a frown. "I'm sorry. I won't do that again. You really stress me out." She sighed and pulled away. "Please keep your phone off silent from now on." "Okay." Jacob nodded while she drove off the curb and started the journey back to the house. As he settled down in his seat and zoned out until they got home, the voice said something that sent an uncomfortable shiver down his spine. "Someday soon, you'll know who I really am." Chapter 4. The next morning, Jacob got up 15 minutes before his mom usually entered to get William out of bed. He had been awake for a while, and for some reason, he couldn't cope with just lying in bed. He felt restless. He was stood in the bathroom and brushing his teeth when the voice spoke. "I hope you slept well last night." Jacob closed his eyes and spat out his toothpaste. He ignored the voice and cleaned the sink. Once that was done, he put the plug in and started to fill it up with cold water. He watched as the clear water splashed the white marble and curved against the shape. When it was full enough, he dipped the tips of his fingers in. As predicted, the water was freezing. He needed a shock to his system to clear his head. He would have had a cold shower, but it was too much effort for his inactive brain. And I hope you have a better morning than yesterday. Jacob took a breath and pushed his face into the icy water. He closed his eyes and allowed his senses to go a little crazy. He liked it when the water went into his ears. It muffled the noise of the birds chirping and his parents' conversations. It relaxed him to the point where he felt like he could concentrate. Just for a moment. The cold made him shiver. He liked how it distracted him from thinking about his irides. Do you like swimming? Even though Jacob loved the tranquil stillness of being underwater, the voice could never be silenced. He pulled his head up and gasped for breath. You're not real, he mumbled out loud, just as his father walked past the door. That's what you think. That's what I know, Jacob thought back. It'd be even more of a freak if I thought you actually existed. You're not a freak. You don't know me. But I do. I've been inside your head for half a year. I know your thoughts, your emotions, and I can hear what you're thinking all the time. You're not real. I am. You'll see soon. Why do you keep saying that? He said out loud. You're in my head. You don't exist. I'm sorry, Jacob. I know how hard this is for you, and I know you're struggling. This will all make sense. Will you just leave me alone? He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bath and dropping his head into his hands. He allowed the sorrow to wash over him. Jacob felt defeated by a voice. It was tearing him apart, and there wasn't a single thing he could do. Son, said softly, but his heart was racing. Jacob's head snapped up to see him standing by the door with kind eyes, and a warm expression. Come on. I want to talk to you. Jacob chewed on his bottom lip and followed his dad out of the bathroom and towards the garden. The sun was poking through clouds and the day looked like it was going to be nice. Jacob always liked it when the sky was a little moody. Storms made him feel comfortable. Maybe because the sky looked sad and he could relate. Scott opened the back door and led him towards a wooden bench at the bottom of the garden. Jacob still had his pajamas on as he sat next to him. They both took a moment to embrace the fresh air and allow the soft morning breeze to hug their skin. Is the voice still talking to you more often? Scott asked, studying him with an intense stare. Jacob nodded while fidgeting. What is it saying? Jacob looked up at the house to see his mother watching out of her bedroom window. He could barely see her due to the reflections on the glass, but he could tell she was disappointed. He took a big breath before speaking the truth. It keeps saying that soon. He'll tell me who he really is. Scott nodded slowly. He noticed that Jacob developed a deeper shade of anxiety because he worried that people will know he has a voice inside of his head. Of course, nobody would know unless they were told. Do you believe it? As always, his voice was incredibly calm. Of course not. Jacob mumbled quietly. I don't like it when it says that. You'll understand soon. I promise. Jacob clenched his jaw. And Scott knew it just spoke. Is he speaking now? It told me that it understands soon. Jacob sighed sadly. Dad, I think I'm scared. Scott lifted his hand and gently rubbed his back. If it begins to threaten you or say bad things, you have to tell me immediately. It doesn't matter if I'm at work or if you're in a lesson. You have to call. I would never hurt you. Jacob nodded and ignored the voice. His dad's advice was more important to take into consideration. Okay, I will, he said quietly and cleared his throat. Thanks. Scott patted his shoulder and stood up. Come on then. You need to get ready for college. When they arrived at college, Jacob's morning was better than yesterday because he slept more, but he was still not 100% okay. He never was. Have a good day. Scott said out of the window while they made their way through the car park. William saw his friends, but he'd rather walk his brother to his first lesson. Family always comes first in his mind. What have you got now? Easton walked through the automatic double doors. English literature. Jacob mumbled and avoided eye contact by looking at the ground like it was the most interesting thing he had ever seen. Sounds boring. William chuckled and nudged his shoulder. Jacob looked up to see a warm grin spread across his face. Don't fall asleep through this one. He rolled his eyes and cracked a smile for the first time this week. I'll try not to. It's good to see you smile. Jacob ignored it and stopped outside a green door. There was quite a lot of people stood outside, and he wished, for once, that he had a private tutor. You should smile more. You look happy when you do. How can I with you in my head? Jacob thought back and turned to his brother for a distraction. What have you got first? Sports management. And I know what you're thinking. It's not fun either. William sighed. But I best get going or it'll burst the vein in my lecturer's head if I'm late. Jacob loved how his brother was able to keep him sane. Okay, I'll see you at home. See you later. William smiled before walking to his own lesson. You're to have a brother like him. I sometimes wish I had a brother. I don't need you to tell me that. Jacob muttered and crossed his arms so he didn't fidget. Soon, you'll have someone else to take care of you like that. Jacob clenched his jaw and fought against rolling his eyes. Can you just be silent for one day? I �K𝐼𝐬 even if I tried. I have to talk to you. Why? Because you're my ma, you're mine. Jacob frowned and glanced around to make sure nobody was watching him. He had chills down his spine even though he knew that anything the voice said was true. It still made him feel uncomfortable. Just then, the door to the room opened and students started piling in. Jacob slowly followed, wanting to get it over and done with because he knew today was going to drag. As he was about to enter, a strong hand grabbed his shoulder and pushed him out of the way. He gasped and fell into the wall with surprisingly a lot of force, causing him to lose his balance and land on the ground. He looked up to see the guy that knocked his bag onto the floor yesterday was smirking at him. Stay out of my way, he grumbled before walking into the room. A few snickers were directed in his way, but most people felt sorry for Jacob, even though nobody helped him up or defended him. His cheeks were burning from embarrassment and his back was throbbing from hitting the wall so hard. Just as he was to climb to his feet and run away, someone quickly crouched in front of him. Are you all right? Jacob was about to tell the voice to shut up when his eyes connected with worried gray ones. An actual person spoke to him this time. He recognized the eyes because he remembered thinking that they were an unusual color. It was Hunter, his brother's friend. Yes, he whispered and quickly stood up. Hunter did too, and it was the first time in a while that Jacob had to look up to someone. Being 6'2" was tall for his age. Hunter was much taller though, maybe a few inches. You're hurting. Hunter frowned. I'm in. Are you hurt? No, Jacob mumbled and pulled his bag back on. That was a lie. His back and shoulder did feel painful. Are you sure? Hunter stared intensely. Yes, he was a man of many words. Well, not out loud. I can tell your brother what happened if you... No, Jacob interrupted with a little frown. It's fine. Okay, Hunter said with those mystic gray eyes. Don't be afraid to hit that guy back. 𝐿𝐻𝐿 a coward, really. Jacob stepped away when he realized that he was a little too close for his liking. Hunter's mouth altered for a second, but he hid it well. You know him. Jacob asked quietly. Unfortunately, yes, but don't worry. I'll make sure he knows his place. His deep voice was unusual for Jacob to listen to. For some reason, when he started to fidget and didn't say anything back, the voice boomed vibrant in his mind. Why are you so cute? He quickly diverted his gaze, looking for any opportunity to escape. Well, I'm gonna leave you to get on with your day. Hunter smiled and almost stepped closer, but he stopped himself. Jacob avoided his gaze completely before turning towards the room. I'll see you tonight. His words made him stop and turn with a frown. Well, didn't tell you. I'm coming over so we can start on the project. Hunter's eyes glistened when Jacob looked at him for a single second. Oh, Jacob whispered and turned in without looking back. He entered the green door and headed straight to the back of the room. Hunter stood there for a moment with a dazed smile on his face until his friend approached him. "Hey Sam." Hunter sighed and masked his expression. But his friend's wise eyes had been watching him talk to the boy. Hello, witch. Hello." He grinned. So Hunter rolled his eyes and walked with him down the corridor. "What? How was it talking to him?" They both made eye contact and Sam saw the frustration on his face. He knew how hard it has been for him. "You have no idea how much I wanted to tell him who I really am." Chapter 5. That evening, Jacob was sitting on the couch and staring into space. College, as predicted, went by extremely slow and he couldn't wait for the weekend, but it was only Tuesday. He was a little nervous that Hunter was coming over. He had to interact with him because they were in a group together. He really was a social person and would much prefer to shut himself in the bedroom all evening. "All right. I've got some paper and pens. Tonight we can just make a spider diagram or something to get together our ideas," William said and entered the room. "Hunter should be here any minute." He was speaking to his brother, who was completely zoned out and didn't hear a word he said. His mom and dad looked at him with a smile. "Is he staying for dinner?" Grace asked. "Dunno." William shrugged and walked over to Jacob. Hey, Jacob snapped out of his trance. "What were you saying?" "By the project." "Tonight we could," before he could finish. There was a loud knock at the door. "Oh, that'll be him." Scott and Grace watched him turn and hurry out of the room. Now that Jacob was still in his own little world, they grabbed his attention. "Are you okay, son?" his mom asked. Jacob nodded and listened to his brother say hello to his friend. "It actually took me a while to find the house." Hunter smiled and took off his coat. William took it and hung it over the door. "It would be if you're not used to the city. I was told that you live on the outskirts of town." "Yeah." Hunter smiled. "We're surrounded by fields and a big forest. I don't come into the city very often. I could probably show you around sometime," William suggested as they walked towards the living room. "Sure, that would be great," Hunter said before entering the room. His eyes instantly found Jacob. He was sitting on the couch and fiddling with the sleeves of his jumper. Hello. Scott greeted him with a friendly smile. "I'm Scott, William and Jacob's father. This is their mother, Grace." Jacob watched his mom get up so she could meet him. "Hi," Hunter smiled, but his gaze kept wandering back to Jacob, who very slowly climbed off the couch. He couldn't be bothered with college work, but the sooner they did it, the quicker it would be over and done with. "I can't be bothered either." "Don't talk to me," Jacob mumbled. "Well, do the work in the bedroom." William said and led his friend to the stairs. Jacob eventually followed, leaving some space between him and Hunter. When they were upstairs, Hunter followed William into the bedroom. It gave him an opportunity to have a good look around. The floor was dark wood and the walls were painted a light blue. The curtains were black because William insisted that they kept out the morning sun so he could sleep in. There was 2 white chests of drawers, one on the left and one on the right. Hunter could tell who slept at what side of the room, judging by the tidings. William is very organized, while Jacob seems to be the type of person who would lose his head if it was screwed on. Hunter stood to the side and allowed Jacob to hurry past so he could get to his bed. He watched him pretty much collapse onto it and sigh with relief. He had the urge to sit with him but thought it would be best to sit on William's bed instead. When they were sat down, William instantly started talking about ideas for the project. Hunter listened, but his mind seemed to be into different places. "I bet you'd rather be sleeping." Jacob leaned back against the wall and connected his fingers together so he didn't fidget. He listened to his brother as he talked about sociological theories. "I thought about linking our campaign to a sport, but Jacob doesn't study it, so maybe we could just write about the theories," William suggested. Hunter only just managed to listen to what he said. "Yeah, sounds good. And it should be easier to write about just the theories too." Jacob knew a bit about sociology, but not as much as his brother. He was the one who had to sit the first year. "It said on the unit guide that we only have to write about 3, so maybe we could each pick one we like the most and write a few paragraphs, and then we can come up with an idea about to put them into a 5-minute video." Hunter stared at William before chuckling with disbelief. I haven't even looked at the unit guide yet. Is that what we have to do? Make a 5-minute video. Yeah, it should be easy, to be honest. Alright, well, we have a month to get it done, so we have loads of time. I just like to get stuff out of the way. William grinned and lay back against his cushions. I can tell. Hunter didn't think Will would be so keen, but he did fail the first year at college, which is probably why he was so eager to get things done this time around. Just then, Grace knocked on the door. Hi boys, she beamed. Hunter, I was just wondering if you would like to stay for dinner. Jacob glanced at him, and it was the first time he noticed his appearance. Hunter had short black hair with olive skin that made his unusual gray eyes really stand out. He had a strong jaw and was very big built. The more Jacob looked, the more he noticed how muscular he actually was. And he was taller than him, making him overall just a really big person. He looked like someone who could hold a lot of dominance. I'd love to if you're sure that's okay. Yes, it's no bother. She smiled. Do you have any diet requirements? No. Well, honestly, anything I'm given. You're like Jacob then. Not a fussy eater, and I bet you eat a lot like him too, she said. But William, on the other hand, Bum. William whined. Go away. We're busy. Grace rolled her eyes and shot him a grin before turning and leaving the room. She'll just go on and on if you don't butt in. He chuckled. A bit like you then. Hunter grinned. William scoffed and shoved him. Jacob watched in amusement as Hunter shoved him back and William fell off the bed. Your smile. It drives me so crazy. Jacob's entertained expression altered as he tried to ignore the voice. Are you made of metal or something? William asked, rubbing his shoulder. Hunter smiled and glanced at Jacob, who very quickly diverted his gaze. Have you always been shy? Yes, always. Jacob sighed and allowed his eyes to drift around the room. Sometimes when he was uninterested, he would respond to the voice like a normal conversation. Boredom made it much harder to ignore it. Is there a reason? Or is it just who you are? I think it's just who I am. Hunter sat back against the wall as William started drawing a spidered diagram. He watched the pen move on the paper, but he was finding it difficult to concentrate tonight. It's sweet. Jacob chewed the inside of his lip until its tongue. It's not sweet and you're not real. So will you please just be quiet so I can pretend to be at least a little bit normal? But you're very far from normal, Jacob. You really don't know how special you are. You talk a lot of Jacob. William snapped his brother out of his deep thought. Do you have a theory that you'd like to write about? He said quietly. I don't know. Have you learned about them all yet? He shook his head to say no. It's fine. We can talk about it tomorrow. William could tell that he wasn't in the mood to think about college work. Jacob debated going downstairs. It felt like too much effort to be around Hunter because he was someone new and he couldn't fully relax. Your scent is so strong. Especially in this room. It's driving me mad. Jacob frowned with confusion. To him, that really made no sense. You'll understand why I say these things soon. I hate it when you say that. You're just a voice in my head. He sighed. And I hate it when you say that because I can't tell you who I really am. Not yet. Hunter glanced over like he was trying to suppress his emotions from showing. Although, William could tell that he was a little distant tonight. Hey, you alright? He asked. Oh, yeah. Hunter sat up straighter and cleared his throat. I've just not felt well today. Well, can I get you anything? You don't have to stay for dinner if you're not well. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. It's nothing I can't get over, he said, but even Jacob saw the pain before he covered it with a smile. All right. But there's no way you're throwing up on my bed. Throw up on that one. Jacob then caught Hunter's eye as usual. His gaze immediately darted somewhere else. There was something about the way Hunter looked at him that made him feel unusual. Any day now and this year of stress and confusion will be over, and I won't have to keep pretending that you mean nothing to me. Jacob bit hard on his bottom lip to prevent any emotion from showing. He hated how the voice talked about reviewing itself. In fact, It was beginning to frighten him. He couldn't predict what it would say next. Because, Jacob Jones, you will become the center of attention in my life, and I can't wait much longer. Chapter 6. That night, when Hunter left the Jones household, he managed to get his dad to give him a lift home. It was dark when he called and he knew his mom didn't really like him walking home when it was getting late. Did you get much work done, Anthony? Hunter's dad asked when his son climbed into the car. Yeah, it was good, he said, putting on his belt when they pulled out of the driveway. I'm glad. How's college going? I've heard from Sam that you're settling in well. That's going all right too. He yawned and crossed his arms. He couldn't wait to get to bed. Anthony smiled but glanced at him. I've been meaning to ask. You've been acting a little distant these past few months and your mother, and I can't help but question if you found your... No, Hunter interrupted. I haven't. Anthony knew he was lying about something. He wouldn't act out of character for no reason. Well, as a witch. He sighed. I tried getting whatever it is you're keeping from me out of Sam, but being loyal to you. He couldn't and wouldn't tell me a thing. Hunter made a mental note to ask Sam when he gets home so he knew exactly what his father asked him. I'm not hiding anything. He mumbled and watched the dark street pass by. You can't lie to me. Son, he chuckled. Whatever it is, you need to tell us. Are you in trouble? No, I'm going to ask Brad then. Anthony was thinking of anything he could to get his son to talk. Don't do that, Hunter muttered. Not in my good books at the minute. He thought back to when Brad knocked Jacob's bat out of his grip and when he pushed him over outside the classroom. It made his blood boil. I know. Sam told me. Hunter stared at his dad. It was clear that he knew he was hiding something. It's very hard to keep secrets in a family like his. But of course, Anthony continued. Hey, will you drop it? He said and rolled his eyes. If I was keeping something from you, it's for a good reason. But I'm not, so just leave me alone. You are. Hunter's picked at his nails with irritation. He wouldn't be able to win argument with his dad. I'm not. Lie all you want. Your mother can smell it on you. That's when Hunter clenched his jaw. He has tried to stop himself from worrying about his issue because he knew that's one way his parents could tell. And he's been getting more stressed as the weeks roll by. She can't because there's nothing to hide. I don't like that you're lying right to my face, Anthony said with a stern voice. I thought you had more respect for me than that. Well, I don't. Carry on with this attitude and I'll ground you. That is your final warning. Hunter's anger flowed through him, pumping through his veins. He had to hold it back. Being grounded was the worst form of punishment. He couldn't be cooped up indoors when he spends most of his time outside. Around 10 minutes after Hunter left, Jacob went to his room, but he felt a little unusual. An emotion was building up inside of him. Don't worry. It's just me being too hot-headed, the voice said, invading his mind. What do you mean? Jacob questioned before lying down in an attempt to relax. It's our connection, the voice replied. We're growing closer. You're in my head. How is that not close enough? It just isn't. This is only the start. Jacob closed his eyes. I don't want to grow closer to you. I just want you to get out of my head because you're not real. I am sorry for all the secrecy. I will explain as much as you would like me to when we're together and bonded. Jacob frowned and resisted the urge to release his frustration. Get out of my head, he grumbled. I'm sorry. I don't care if you're sorry. Jacob was losing his patience. He has in a few months, so it had been building up inside of him for a while. I just want you to stop ruining my life. It hurts when you say that. The voice in Jacob's head sounded different. It sounded emotional. When Hunter and his dad arrived at their home, they didn't speak for the rest of the journey. It was clear to Anthony that his son was angry and stressed about something. It worried him that he was trying to keep it a secret. After he parked the car, he turned to look at his boy who was glaring out of the window. Something in his stare shimmered with sadness. It clearly isn't good for you to be this angry and upset over. Hunter was done listening to his dad and climbed out of the car before he could finish. Hey, Anthony growled and quickly followed him. Don't you walk away from me. Hunter blocked out his voice and stormed up the wooden steps and into his home. His mother, Margot, stood up from the table and watched him hurry by. They lived in a small temporary studio, so everything was on the same floor, including the bedrooms. Just before Hunter could enter his room, his dad caught up with him and grabbed his shoulder. Hunter stood still, but he needed space to cool down. It was good and it wasn't wise for him to be this irritated. Please, son. His mother's soothing voice filled his ears. Tell me what's wrong. Jacob was sitting on the edge of his bed and he was almost shaking from trying to keep himself together. He could barely cope. He felt weird, almost like his emotions were all over the place and he couldn't keep control of how he felt. Not to mention that the voice was making less and less sense as the days went on. He was feeling overwhelmed. Too overwhelmed. His life was in someone else's hands. Someone who doesn't exist. There's nothing wrong. Why are you lying to us? Margot asked. Yes, his dad may have the alpha title, but Hunter's mother was just as, or if not more important. Her words were wise and always correct. She could see right through people and it annoyed her son sometimes. Just leave me alone. He tried going into his room, but his dad stopped him. There's only one thing that I can think of that's making you behave this way. Hunter pinched the bridge of his nose and turned around. His family held a great secret. There was someone who was growing very special to him who needed to know their secret. He knew the reaction would be huge. Why wouldn't it? To humans, his kind don't exist except for movies and books. They're seen as fictional characters and their existence only goes as far as the imagination. Are you developing a connection with a mate? Margot asked calmly. Hunter wasn't ready to tell his parents. He had no idea how they would react to something like this. So he swallowed any emotion he had and only showed a blank expression no. Margot's patience had been stretched almost to its greatest capacity. She knew he was lying, but she also knew that he was scared and worried about something. Whatever it is. I can tell that it's troubling you. Have you admitted to someone at college about who you are? Hunter frowned but quickly stepped back into his room, causing his dad to sigh. Once he was in his room, they couldn't enter because it was his territory and only his. Not even his closest friends would dare to enter. It would be very, very frowned upon for someone to invade it. Like him stupid enough to admit something like that. He grumbled and crossed his arms. Well, sometimes it can be hard. What do you think I would have said? He scoffed. Oh yeah. And by the way, I'm a werewolf. Chapter 7. Hunter shut the bedroom door and collapsed onto his double bed that took up most of the floor space. He buried his face into the pillow and inhaled deeply, trying to calm himself, knowing that a certain someone also felt his anger. He thought about the argument with his parents. Why would they think that he would tell an average human about who he was? Yes, he was a werewolf and so were his parents. To him, it was completely normal to have such a label. He was born that way, just like his mom and dad. Werewolves have existed in his family for thousands of years, and he was raised to believe that two types of species exist. Humankind and his kind. Because he was born as a werewolf. He had the pleasure of being the alpha of his own pack. Now that he is old enough, there are 7 members, including him. For many, many years, werewolves have been living in secret among humans. They have their secret packs and societies and they live their separate lives. They don't mix unless, of course, a werewolf mates to a human by a powerful connection that they like to 𝐿𝐻𝐻 or love. They don't eat people like the stereotype. They mostly hunt foxes, rabbits, and deer. There really isn't a lot for them to chase. Being in England and all, they cope with what they have. They are also exceptionally dominant and thrive from being a powerful leader. This also means that they are incredibly protective of what is theirs, such as their territory, family, their pack and a mate. Just like in the movies, they can change into huge wolves with sharp teeth and sharp claws. All a werewolf has to do is imagine their body changing and the transformation will begin. Nobody knows how. It just happens. The werewolves can't test how and why these things happen to them, because eventually, the word and a proof that they do exist will get out and they'll be hunted, and most likely killed. A few people who are extreme believers of anything paranormal like to wander the forest at night, looking for abnormally large wolves. It was like ghost hunters. Some people believe, but many don't. Although, that doesn't stop them from searching. Hunter rolled onto his back and stared at his ceiling. He had managed to somewhat calm himself, but now he was starting to get anxious. He hid something from his parents and he really didn't want them to find out. He was ready. Just then, someone knocked on the front door. He knew who it was because he could smell him. That's another thing about werewolves. They have an immense ability to detect people by their scent, especially a mate. Hunter listened to footsteps as they approached his bedroom door. He knew they wouldn't come in. This was his territory and only his. Hey, a voice said through the door. Sam was the beta of Hunter's pack, which means that if anything happens to the alpha that would prevent him from running the pack, Sam would be second in command. "Want to go for a walk?" Hunter rubbed his eyes and sat up. He needed fresh air and he also needed to talk to his beta about his current situation. Sam was stood next to the door when it opened and Hunter, without looking at his parents, headed towards the front door and left. He knew Sam would follow. The boys walked for a few minutes in silence until they knew that whatever they discussed wouldn't be heard by anyone else. Hunter turned and stared hard. "What did my dad ask you and what did you tell him?" Sam raised his hands in defense. "You know I would never tell him. It has to come from your mouth." He was a little scared of his alpha when he was in an agitated mood. Hunter's eyes were amused that his father questioned his beta, but his parents always went to Sam. He was like a member of the family. "What did he ask you?" he demanded with a calmer tone. "Well, Sam sighed. "He was talking about you and how you've been acting a bit different, which is understandable considering what you're going through. I didn't say anything, but then he asked if you were in trouble or hiding anything. I said there was nothing wrong with you and that everything was fine." He clearly didn't believe me. "Clearly," Hunter muttered. "He knows something's up. So does Mom." Sam shook his head. "If Margot knows there's something wrong, she won't stop until she figures it out. This isn't good. They'll find out soon. I don't want them to find out before the connection happens." Hunter hated feeling so distracted. He had to be strong for his pack. Well, maybe you should tell them." "No, I won't be able to cope if they reject it." In all honesty, Alpha. Sam called him Alpha when he was about to express his opinion as a sign of respect. "I'm not sure they will. They love you enough to understand." Hunter watched his feet while they walked. "Do you accept it just because I'm your Alpha?" "No," Sam frowned. "I accept it because I'm happy for you. Finding your mate is a special time for any wolf, including you, because it doesn't matter who it is. You don't get to choose." Hunter stopped and connected their gaze. His gray eyes shimmered in the dimming light. "Thank you, Sam, your support means a lot." He loved being praised by his alpha. It's a shame that not everyone is supportive of this. There was one member of the pack that strongly disagreed with Hunter finding his maiden that was bred. He was, unfortunately, a Delta, which means he was third in command. Sam wished he was one of the 𝐿 who was considered to be the weakest members. Brad is really pushing his luck. Hunter could feel his anger rising, just from thinking about it. God help him if he tries to hurt my mate when the connection is set. It's hard enough not to rip his sorry heart out every time I see him. Sam and Brad mostly didn't see eye to eye, but they always have each other's backs because, of course, they were pack members. "I don't know who he thinks he is," Sam muttered, "but I will fully support any form of torture directed in his direction." Hunter chuckled. He liked how Sam was protective over his mate because when they are officially introduced into the pack, it'll be the wolf's second role to keep his mate safe. If 𝐻𝐸's not careful, he'll be looking for another pack soon. I will also fully support that. They both smiled and continued to walk across the dark field. Hunter was going to stray too far from home, as his mom wouldn't appreciate that. He liked the crisp air and the feel of the wind blowing against his skin. He wanted to change and run freely for miles, but it was safe at this time. Not when rival packs have recently been spotted in their area. So Sam spoke after his sharp eyes can be approaching trees. When do you think the bond will deepen so you can connect? Any day now, Hunter replied. I'm able to talk to my mate more often. But it's harder because I can't say anything that'll reveal who I am until it's official. I do feel sorry for your mate. He seems to be struggling more each day. It's only because he is starting to feel it too. It hurts when he looks depressed every morning and I'm the one who's able to change that. Sam stopped and dared to rest a hand on his alpha's shoulder. He didn't think it was right that Hunter's mate was hearing a voice but kept in the dark. It was really his place to voice the concern. You can't help how he feels for now. I guess you just need to wait it out until you can bond with him. As soon as you're ready, he'll get the pack together and safely get you both together so you can connect away from your parents or his family. That doesn't make me feel any better about what I've done to his confidence. Hunter felt bad every time he thought about how much his mate hated himself. Sam took his hand back and crossed his arms with thought. How will you tell him? Will you tell him in his head? No, of course not. Hunter frowned. Can you imagine how much that will freak him out? It was just a thought, Sam said quietly. But then again, it's not like I can walk up to him and say, by the way, Jacob, I'm a werewolf. You're my mate. And I'm the voice inside of your head.